Well, hello there once again. Today, more on the hard and soft bot. Now, the hard and soft bot was launched last week. Some of you may have seen the previous video I did, which was about how the staking works within the bot. And for any of you who are familiar with how the hard and soft staking plan works, none of that will have been new to you. But with the bot being launched last week, it seemed like a good idea to do a quick refresher on that for the benefit of anyone who was new to the staking plan and new to the bot. So that was that. This week I want to have a look at some strategies, see how they've been going over the last week. I have a few revisions to a couple strategies that I have been running. And a question I've been asked a few times is how to get the bot to just do harness races, because one of the strategies, a couple of the strategies in fact, do relate to just harness racing. There's a little bit of a trick to that. I'll go through that with you as well. So firstly, this is pretty much 8 days worth of results in the bot, and you can see some have been going well, some haven't. So a quick look at what we have here. In back one, this has been the harness favourites to win between 2 and 450. Back two has been the harness second favourites between 3 and 10. Interestingly, back one, the favourites to win in the harness obviously not looking so great. The second favourites doesn't look great on that figure, but I'll show you some more numbers on that. There is actually hope for that one. I'm not so convinced there's hope for the favourites the way that's set, but I have another way that could work for the favourites there. Back three is the real standout here. This one's the real standout. This is the favourites to win in the UK and South Africa, between $2 and $4.50. This has been going gangbusters, really has. You can see $11.85 profit off 10-cent base stake. Now, South Africa, I established during earlier testing, has a very good strike rate for favourites in this price range. The UK seems to as well quite a bit of the time, especially when you get some of those smaller races. At the moment we're going through a bit of a period in the UK where there's more festival racing and some really humongous fields. You may have seen some of those races, 20 horses running 4,000 metres, jumping over 1,700 hurdles, and by the end of it, you've got 5 horses that don't have a jockey, and one of them usually wins the race. Sometimes it's the one you've backed as well, but because it doesn't have the jockey anymore, it doesn't count. It'd be great if you could win without the jockey. So many of those horses seem to manage it, at least the ones that stay on the course. Some of them decide to just take a detour over there, and that's the end of their race. Back four, you can see down 477 at the moment. That's the second favourite to win UK and South Africa. I haven't done a lot of digging into that one as yet. I don't know if I'll continue that one or not. Maybe I'll probably continue it at the moment and see what it does. It looked good in testing. It hasn't been as good over the last week. I'll probably give that another week. It's not looking terrible, it's not looking great, so yeah, I guess I'll let that one go for a while and see how it looks. Back five is the one that I'm quite interested in. This is a very low volume strategy, but this one, you can see here, the country I've got selected here is other. Now, the country it's actually betting on here is France. French racing, first favourite to place between $1.20 and $1.70. Now, you can see over the last week it's made 77 cents. It's not a huge number by any means, but it is in profit, and it is consistently in profit. Every time I've looked at it over the last week, it has been in profit. It's slow, but it is there. Back six is a similar one. It's France's second favourite, again 120 to 170. It's not been in profit for most of the last week. It's scraped back into profit in the last day. It's up 7 cents. Long term, I reckon that one's probably going to roughly break even, so maybe it's not really worth continuing. Maybe it is, probably no harm in having it there. But favourites to place in French racing seem to do quite well. Conversely, favourites to win in French racing do not tend to do well. Really don't know why that is, but they do seem to run a place, and they do seem to manage to make a profit there, which is great. So a bit of a look at some of the results. Now I'll just go to the one that's a standout here, back three, the British and South African favourites to win. That I've had running in tabs 5 and tab 6, and you can see tab 5 up $5.62, tab 6 up $6.23. So that shows me that these have had a fairly consistent winning run because they've managed to keep both tabs moving along. If we have a look at a different one, for example, back 1, which we saw was in a negative position, tab 1 down 12.44, tab 2 down 120. They're very uneven. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing for them to be uneven, but what it does show me there is that one of them is doing a lot more activity than the other one, which does tend to indicate there's some longer losing runs happening in one of the tabs. Again, not necessarily a bad thing. You can find that they will recover over time depending on how things are set, but certainly in that case, the favourites for Australia and New Zealand harness racing, there's been a couple stop losses hit there, and that has hampered things. I'll come back to that point in a moment, but the UK racing, it's pretty consistent. This is the last couple days worth here almost, and you can see there's a $3.50 winner, a $2.10 winner, a $4 winner, a $2.20 winner, a $2.02 winner. There's a bunch of losses in a row here, but then a $2.74 winner, $2.04 winner, a couple more losses, $3.85 winner, $2.34 winner. You can see it's reached a target here because then the staking's reset, and a $2.34 winner there. So that's doing quite well. Tab 6 looks to be a pretty similar story. A $2.36 winner, a $3.05 winner, a $2.66 winner. That's managed to reach target. Staking's reset. $3.40 winner. A few losses. $2.66 winner. A couple losses. $2.44 winner. $2.54 winner. You see the point. What I do like to see here is these grouped winners. So you see here there's 3 in a row. There's another 2 in a row here. There's 3 in a row up here. It's good to see these winners in a row. That's really where the hard and soft staking system really excels. Sure, you can go win, loss, win, loss, win, loss, win, loss, and as long as you're getting decent prices in there, you can still come out ahead. But when you get 2, 3, 4 winners in a row, that's where the system really starts to work really well, and that's what you can see seems to be happening here with the British racing. So that's doing well. I'm certainly happy with that. Now, let's have a quick look at the French placing. Now, I've been sharing tabs 9 and 10 for back 5 and 6 simply because I've kind of ran out of room. I probably, given how low volume it is, French racing tends to only have a couple meetings a day. Some days there's only 1 meeting. I think 3 is the most I've ever seen in a day in France. So there's not a lot of volume, and because of the price range I've got set, there's not a lot of volume. A lot of favourites are outside this price range. There are plenty in this price range, but there's also quite a few outside it, so not a huge volume. But if we have a look here at tab 9, you can see tab 9 for this has made 9 cents profit for back 5 and 68 cents profit for, sorry, let me try that again. 9 cents profit in tab 9, 68 cents profit in tab 10. You can see here there's quite a lot of back 5 here in tab 10. It's been mostly winners. There's actually very few losses in here. You can see there's a loss there, a loss there, a loss there, but otherwise this is pretty much all winners, which is great. Over here, it's been not quite as successful. Back 5 winner, back 5 winner, back 5 loss, back 5 winner, back 5 winner, back 5 winner, back 5 winner, back 5 loss, winner, winner, winner. Where are we here? Winner. It's reached a profit target there and reset staking. So winner, winner. Then a few losses in a row, which has pushed it back a little bit, which is why this is back down to 9 cents really. Then winner, winner, loss. So it'll get there eventually. It's just, it takes a little while. And as I say, it is very low volume. Now, another question I have actually been asked is, should I be resetting every day? That probably depends a little bit on your strategy. I would say no in most cases, and especially if you're looking at something low volume like this, because the staking plan needs time to work, and if you're resetting every day with a system like this where it is such low volume, you're not going to give the staking plan a chance to get going really. Something higher volume, certainly you could consider that, but I'd probably be looking at resetting every few days at the most. I've actually just had this running for 8 days straight without resetting. So I'm probably thinking what I'll probably do is reset maybe once every 10 days. Maybe once a week, maybe once every 10 days. Probably depends a little bit on the position of the strategies as well, because if the strategies are slowly recovering, I might actually let them run a little bit longer. So I'm probably looking at 7 to 10 days is probably the number where I'm going to land on that, but haven't really made a firm decision on that yet. So, the strategies that aren't doing quite so well at the moment, and how can they be improved? Well, that's an interesting question. Let's have a look here at back one, which is the first favourite to win in Australia and New Zealand, and I've only been doing harness racing on this. Now you can see it's down 1364. The reason for that is it's hit the stop loss a few times. It hasn't recovered from that. It's hit a stop loss, it's hit another stop loss. It's really not recovering from that. So I was interested to see how it would have gone if I didn't have the stop loss in place. So you can see here it's set at the moment at $7, which is 70 times the starting stake. So if I just go into, not that one, pull up the right one, here we are. Here's a look in the hard and soft staking cloud version. I've just gone and taken the results from tab 1. I didn't bother doing both tabs, one tab was easier to do. So tab 1 ended up down 1244 with the stop losses in place. Without the stop losses, it would have ended up down 115.49. You can see that's a very unpleasant looking graph. So I'm not convinced that this is going to work long term, the favourites in that price range of 2 to 450, which is unfortunate. It was looking pretty good in testing, but it seems quite probable that it was actually just a couple good days, so or more than a couple good days, but a few good days. But since then, it hasn't really gone as well. Maybe over time it would do better. I'm not entirely convinced. So what could be better? Well, I do have a thought on that. Now, harness racing in Australia and New Zealand tends to have a pretty good strike rate for favourites when they're odds on. So I had a look through the ANZ analyzer, and I had a look at, if we just see here, had a look, harness racing favourites between 110 and 180. Now I know previously I've said this works best when you're looking at something that's $2 or more, because that way each time you have a winner, it's recovering more than the loss from the previous loss. But as I've said before, favourites win about a third of the time. So if we say a third of the time, about $2 pricing, if we have a higher strike rate, we can lower the prices. If we have a lower strike rate, we're going to need higher prices. You have to sort of work out where the balance is on that. So $1.10 to $1.80 for harness is an interesting one. If I go back in here, now you can see at level stakes over the course of, I'm looking at 12 months worth of data here. So this is actually looking at February last year through to the end of January this year, so 12 months worth of data. Over that period of time, at level staking of $1 per race, it ends up being down $95, ends up being minus 4%. The strike rate's interesting though, 67%. Now, the reason that strike rate's important here is that it is quite a good number. Also important, if we have a look down the results side here, there's a lot of spots here where there's plenty of winners in a row. Now that, as I've said before, is important. Have a look at this one here. And then, one loss and then a bunch more winners. So having a lot of winners in a row is very useful. That 67% strike rate is important because what I've done is I've taken the first 10 days worth of data from here, and it actually has a lower strike rate than the year overall. Now I find this important because if we know that overall this tends to have about a 67% strike rate, and if I take a period of time that's a lower strike rate than that, if that can come out ahead, then we know that there's a good chance that over the long haul, the system should come out even further ahead. If it can perform well in the lower strike rate times, it should be able to perform even better in the higher strike rate times. So, first 10 days worth of this here, if I just highlight the return at level staking of $1 per runner, that comes up to minus $5.88. As I say, it's a lower strike rate as well than the 67%. So let's have a look. I've charted that as well in the hard and soft cloud staking system. And you can see over those 10 days there were 70 bets and a strike rate of 66%. And yet it's come out ahead, $5.82. Now this is at $1 stakes with a 9% commission. I have previously used 8% as the rate for commission for Australia and New Zealand with Betfair. They're actually bumping that up by pretty much 1 percentage point across the board later this month, I think. I have it in my calendar. I think it's next week, the week after. Anyway, so I've just used 9% as a figure for this. And you can see it comes out ahead by $5.82 in that period using the $1 stake. So if we're using 10-cent stakes, it'd be 58 cents, but nonetheless it would still be ahead. You can see it had a period here where it went a fair way down, in fact down to minus 52, but it has come back up here, and at its best here it was up 1068, ends up down up 582, but obviously you'd expect a little bit more recovery a little bit later in. If you so this, obviously I'm looking at this without that same stop loss, because if I did have that, actually no, this would never have hit that stop loss because the stop loss is 70 times the base stake, and if we're looking at dollar stakes, the stop loss would have been minus 70 here, and it never got there. So, so even with that particular stop loss in place, this still works out quite nicely. So this would work, it seems. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace the $2 to $4.50 with what I had here, which was 110 to 180 for the favourites to win in Australia and New Zealand harness racing, 110 to 180. Incidentally, this minimum match number here, I've got that set to $1,000. Now, if you're in the UK, you might want to change that, set that £500 thereabouts. harness racing in Australia and New Zealand, especially during the day, has fairly low liquidity. The Australian meetings tend to have a little bit more than the New Zealand meetings, but depending on the day, a lot of the harness racing meetings end up on Sky Racing 2, the secondary Sky Racing channel, and they tend to have very low liquidity. It depends on scheduling. If there's a lot of horse gallops meetings that day and a few harness meetings, often the harness meetings end up being bumped off to Sky 2, and they tend to have lower liquidity. So I've got $1,000 here because if I have it at 5,000, which is what I often do for the gallops, most of those daytime meetings I just don't get any bets on. So 1,000, that lower minimum matched, as I say, £500 if you're in the UK, tends to mean you actually get these bets on. Otherwise, what's the point if you're not getting the bets on? So on to back two, second favourites to win. Now, as you see, it's down $5.70. I've got this same stop loss in place here, $7, so 70 times the initial stake. Again, I was curious, how would this look without the stop loss? What made me really curious about that is if we have a look here at tab 3, where I've got back to running, you can see there's a point back here where it's down 11.33. In fact, it's worse than that back here, down 11.48. There's even worse points. There's down 15.07, and yet by the end of it, it's only down 6.22. So clearly, it is recovering. It's hit stop losses along the way, but it is recovering. So how would it look without the stop loss? So again, I've taken what's in tab 3 here, and I've put it in. I've charted it in the cloud version without a stop loss. Those same bets, 196 of them over the last 8 days, ends up in profit of $4.72 if you don't have a stop loss, or at least if you don't have that particular stop loss. In this case, the worst position it was in was looks to be about minus 34. So find that here. This is off the 10-cent stake, of course. Scroll down, so we've got minus 33.81 here. That looks like that's the worst of it. Yeah, that one looks like it's 33.99. There we go. That's the worst of it. So minus 34 off the 10-cent stake. So it's a fair way down, but as you can see, when it's gone through this lean period here, but then it's had not necessarily consecutive winners, although there are a couple here, but it's had enough winners at decent prices as well to recover. And if we have a look at some of those prices, for example, so if we go back down here to where we are at this minus 34 sort of level, there's this winner here at a price of 440, winner here at 520, a winner at 325, winner at 450, winner at 385, winner at 440, winner at $4, winner at 640, winner at 340, 620, 490, 380. I'm looking at this backwards. Don't mind me, I'm sorry. When I took the data from the bot, of course it goes from the bottom up. In the cloud version we're going down from top down. So let me try this again, looking at it the correct way. Sorry, it's been a long week, and yes, it's been a long week. But you saw some of those prices anyway. They're nice prices. But if we look a little bit further down here, we've got winner at 590. There's a winner here at 920. Winner at 460. You see these stakes are continuing to increase at this stage. Winner at 360. A couple winners in a row here, 4 and 470. Then a 470 and a 5. And it's after this $5 winner that we end up making our profit target and staking resets. And so we're at $2 for profit there. You can see by the end of this we're up 472. But as you can see, it does seem to work. It just needs probably to not have as tight a stop loss. The reason I had that stop loss set at $7 or 70 times the initial stake originally was that for some of the testing prior to the launch of the bot, I came to the conclusion that for a lot of strategies, once you get beyond that point of 70 times the initial stake, once your loss is 70 times the initial stake, it seemed to be quite difficult to recover from that. That was really for the favourites. The second favourites obviously have much higher prices. Pardon me. Second favourites have much higher prices, so they have a better chance of recovery. So in that case, the stop loss can probably be wound out quite a bit. So in this case, the worst we had was about minus 40, so that's 400 times the initial stake. I'm probably going to look at setting that at probably $50, and then so instead of 70 here, I'll go 50. Maybe I go more, I don't know. 50 seems like a reasonable number considering what I've seen here. But yeah, I'll go 50 for now, we'll see how it goes. If it has to be wound out further, that's concerning. But certainly 50 seems like a reasonable position at the moment. It certainly will mean, I mean, if it gets there, it's, recovery from that is, with the restart of staking, is going to be difficult. But well, 50 seems like a reasonable number anyway. Which brings me to a question I have been asked a few times, and that is how to get the bot to look at just harness racing. Well, that's an interesting question. So there's a couple of things that really need to be done here. These boxes all really need to be ticked. So allow non-handicap, allow handicap, allow harness. Actually, you might not need the allow handicap, but it's a little bit neater if you do have it in there, because what you get is everything is ticked. Now the question I was asked is, if I untick these two, the allow non-handicap and allow handicap, and just leave the allow harness ticked, will that do the job? Unfortunately not, and I'll show you why. So I'll just untick those. I'm looking at back 2, sorry. And just let that reload. You can see what it's done. All of the harness racing is still in here. So harness racing is indicated by the word pace or trot being in the title of the race. It's still in here, but it's not ticked. Now, the allow non-handicap and allow handicap boxes will tick the various events, the various relevant events. The allow harness box does not do the same thing. It doesn't tick boxes for you. What it does is allows the harness races to appear in the list. The one that actually ticks the boxes for them is the allow non-handicap. So if I tick that, you'll see it reloads here, and you can see all of the non-handicaps, which, as according to the bot, includes the harness racing, are now ticked. So you could leave the allow handicap unticked if you're just doing harness racing. You could, up to you. I generally just leave it ticked. It gives me a neater thing. I'm not looking at any boxes unticked when it first loads. So it's a little bit easier for what I need to do next. So there's a simple way to do this if you're resetting the bot on a regular basis. But given with these strategies, I think it's best leaving them run for a number of days. You can't just go and deselect venues. You can, but on a later day you're likely to miss some harness races if you do. The reason for that is that there are some places in Australia which tend to have both gallops meetings and harness meetings, not necessarily at the same venue, but within the same town. and they're named the same in Betfair. So, for example, Wagga Wagga tends to have both gallops and harness. Tamworth has gallops and harness. Goulburn has gallops and harness. Canberra has gallops and harness. There's Hobart does as well. So what you'll find is if you go, Newcastle as well does, I think, if memory serves. So if we were to go into the venues tab here and untick Newcastle, Newcastle then disappears out of the bot until the bot is next reopened. This is a problem if tomorrow or the next day or the day after that Newcastle has a harness meeting, because it just won't show up. So I do this in 2 stages. I bring up the Harness Racing Australia website, harness.org.au, and I go to their meeting calendar. And it shows me at a glance all of the meetings coming up. Now, the ones that are in grey, you don't have to worry about, they're just trials. The ones that are coloured, those are the actual meetings that are coming up. So, so today is the 20th, we've got Redcliffe, Tamworth, Kilmore, Penrith. That's today for harness racing. You can see there's a bunch of races in future days. Now I was talking about Newcastle just a moment ago. So we can see here Newcastle is in today's list for gallops. Tomorrow they have a harness meeting. So that's slightly difficult. I don't want to remove Newcastle completely because it won't show up tomorrow. So I'm probably going to let the bot run over the weekend and then reset on Monday, because I've had it running for 8 days, so it's probably due for a reset sometime soon. I mean, I have noticed actually that that the bots aren't using anywhere near as much memory as they used to. See here, the hard and soft bot sitting at 137 megabytes. There seems to have been some improvement in the memory management of the bots. One of the big issues I found with the bots previously that resulted in them needing to be restarted every now and then was that they tended to use up more and more memory the longer they were open. The newer bots seem to not be doing that. So whatever that memory issue was seems to be resolved. So they can be left open for much longer periods now without anything strange happening, especially if you're in a limited memory environment. So if you're running on a VPS, for example, or as I was doing previously, I had them in a virtual machine on another computer with quite limited memory. And I would find that if I left them running for too long, they'd use up too much memory and Windows would start doing weird things to them. And then sometimes they'd just close randomly because Windows needed some memory, or Windows would start doing weird things. It was just... but the recent bots, and hard and soft bot being one of those, they don't seem to eat memory the way the older bots do, so they can be left running for longer periods. Regardless, I'm probably going to restart it sometime early next week, or maybe I'll let it run until the end of the month. I mean, that is 10, 11 days away, but maybe. Maybe I'll let it run. I did accidentally untick a venue that I shouldn't have, so I probably shouldn't let it keep running, so maybe I'll restart it in the next couple of days, but we'll see. I'm rambling. Anyway, so the first thing I really want to check here when I'm removing venues is, do they have a harness meeting coming up in the coming days? If so, I don't want to untick the venue from the venues column. So Tamworth is a harness meeting, that's fine. Kyneton, I don't think Kyneton ever has harness, but I'll have a quick look the next few days. There's no Kyneton, so I'm going to untick Kyneton. Albury I know does have harness from time to time. At least I think it does. Not in the next few days, so that can be unticked, that's fine. Tamworth is harness meeting today, we've already established that. Redcliffe is harness as usual. So that's Newcastle. Well, Newcastle has a harness meeting tomorrow, so instead of unticking Newcastle from the venues, I'm just going to untick the races. So Newcastle race 1, Newcastle race 2, Newcastle race 3, Newcastle race 4, Newcastle race 5, Newcastle race 6, Newcastle race 7, Newcastle race 8, and that's all of Newcastle. Alright, so Redcliffe is harnessed. Geraldton today, it's Western Australia, so it'll be a little bit further down. Geraldton is gallops today. Geraldton does not have any harness racing coming up, so it can be removed. Penrith is harness racing. It's probably a night meeting, but Penrith is always harness racing, so that one's fine. So once you've done that, you can click the reload button. Now, if you're looking at a really long list, so suppose it's a Friday or a Saturday or a Sunday and there's just a bazillion gallops meetings, you can hit reload after unticking a meeting just to make your list a little bit smaller, especially if you're hunting for races like I was doing then. But let's do reload of back 2, which is where we are. And what we will see, once it thinks about it, is our harness meetings are still there. Newcastle is still there because it's still in the venues, but it's unticked because we unticked it. So the Newcastle races won't get bets, but Newcastle as a venue still exists, so tomorrow it will show up in the list and we'll have the meeting, the races there. It's worth noting with the way Betfair loads the gallops and the harness racing that Betfair tends to load the gallops first. So often the gallops will turn up the night before, sometimes the morning of. The harness meetings tend to show up a little bit later in the morning Australian time. So you can sometimes very easily go through and get rid of the gallops meetings, and then the bot will just, as it loads more, as Betfair puts more meetings in, the bot will load more meetings, and the meetings it loads will be the harness meetings that Betfair have just recently put in. But that list there will work for today's harness meetings, which is great. So that's how I go about doing it. I do leave auto reload ticked so that as it loads more races, it will continue to load, because it does only look ahead, I think it's 12 hours at a time, so sometimes you will end up with, especially if you're setting this up in the morning, you will, maybe at say 10 in the morning, you'll find there are harness meetings that go later into the night, and they need to eventually load when the bot gets up to that. Tonight there's no harness meetings in Western Australia, so don't really have to worry about that, but tomorrow, Northern in Western Australia, is a night meeting, so that one certainly will run to much later in the night, possibly to the early hours of the morning, East Coast time. So that's a little look at the hardened softbot and how things are going. Certainly I think I'm going to, as I said, I have my adjustment here to back 1 for the favourites. I'm going to see how that goes with the odds-on favourites in that price range 110 to 180, but leave the rest of the settings as is. For the second favourites in Australia, New Zealand harness racing, I will have the stop loss further out. UK and South Africa, first favourite to win between 2 and 450, I'll leave running because it's doing quite well. For the second favourites in UK and South Africa, I'll leave it running. I'm not sure how it'll go, but I'll leave it running. It's not doing terribly, it's not doing great. We'll see how it goes over the longer term. And I'm going to leave the favourites for France running for the place between 120 and 170. And there's Pebbles and Shiley. They found something to bark at. But I'll leave the favourites to place in France running. I'm not going to worry about leaving the second favourites running. I will turn that one off. It's, as I say, long term, I think it's probably a break even. But the others, I think, all show reasonable promise. So we'll see how they go. So that's hard and soft bot. I guess I'll probably come back in a week or so and give you a results update. I think it's probably only fair, see how things are tracking. So I think what I will actually do now is reset the bot now, so we have a fresh slate, and I will come back to you next week with a look at those results. So until then, that is the hard and soft bot. Of course, there's a link in the description below as always, and I hope it's treating you well. I hope your punting in general is treating you well. Good luck with it all. I'll see you next week.